conservation officer at one of our sort of absolutely best rich wildlife sites down at Burnham Beaches, an expert on managing woodland and veteran trees, ancient woodland and veteran trees, and a leading light in the study of creatures that live under logs and stones, and in fact wrote the book on that, which I think has got a new edition.
Yes, just come out, I think last year.
Yes, yes. So really pleased, because this is a group that we don't often cover at our seminars. So over to you, Helen.
Okay, thank you. And yes, rather different to moths and dragonflies, I'm sort of assuming that you don't know lots and lots and lots of things about millipedes and centipedes. Mick asked me to talk about millipedes, centipedes and woodlice, and I thought that was a bit of a tall order in 20 minutes. So I'm focusing largely on millipedes, but actually there are quite a bit about centipedes and a few other groups as well. To start off with, one of our more colourful species. This isn't really a British species, but it might just turn up if you buy a plant pot. So things do come in, as Martin was mentioning with the moss, things do come in with plant pots and things. So you might just come across something like this, which has turned up a couple of times. It's a tropical species, and it's not one that you'd expect in bugs. So I'm going to concentrate more on our local species. What is a myriapod? They have 10 pairs of legs or more when adult, so a lot of them gain legs as they get older, but when they're adult they have at least 9 pairs of legs. And they have a head and a telson, and the body segments in between are pretty much similar. So lots of body segments, centipedes at the top and a millipede at the bottom. This is one of our very common millipedes found within decaying wood. Myriapods, despite the fact that I've lived for a very large part of my life in Buckinghamshire, it's not the best recorded county in Britain. If you look at the map and sort of screw up your eyes a little bit, you'll see that it's a bit of a pale spot around where we are. So Buckinghamshire and Hertfordshire are actually not terribly well recorded. To try and address that, we have had a couple of meetings with the British Myriapod and Isopod group. One in 2004 at Green Park, not very far from here. And then this year we were in Berkhamsted, and although we were in Hertfordshire, ostensibly trying to fill up some of the white spaces in Hertfordshire, various people did come into Bucks as well. And then being based at Burnham Beaches, we've run quite a lot of pitfall traps and various other sampling techniques within the beaches, so we've probably quite well known the fauna there. This, I should say, is one of our common species, so it should really be found pretty much all over the south of England. I'd expect to see that completely filled in, but it just gives you a sort of indication of the fact that there's plenty of things to be discovered in Bucks, I'm sure. Centipedes, 1 pair of legs per segment, big poison claws, because they are carnivores, generally fairly fast moving, although some of them are smaller and slower, and then between 15 and 101 pairs of legs when they mature. And actually the number of legs is quite important for telling the group and also sometimes the species. So actually just counting the legs on centipedes can get you quite a long way in terms of working out what they are. There's around 2,800 described, 58 in Britain and around 25 in Bucks. Some of my figures are around because we don't have very accurate, we've got lists, but I'm sure there's more than on the lists. This is quite an relatively unusual centipede. It's a sort of ancient woodland species, and we have it at Burnham Beaches, we have it at Dancer's End, we have it at 1 or 2 other sites in Bucks, so it's a reasonably unusual one that is a Buckinghamshire species. The main groups of centipedes, there's the Geophilomorpha, sometimes called soil centipedes, which are the long ones with lots of pairs of legs, somewhere between 35 and 101 pairs of legs. And these are the ones where actually counting the legs can really help you in terms of identifying what it is. Until 2001, we had one very common species, Geophilus carpophagus, and even back in the 1960s, Ted Eaton, who wrote a book about centipedes then, recognised that there was 2 forms, a short form and a long form. And actually in 2001 they were separated into 2 different species, Geophilus carpophagus and Geophilus easoni. So there's not all that many records for easoni around the country, so it's one species that is undoubtedly throughout Bucks, but it's one to look out for because it's been relatively under-recorded because of the separation fairly recently. This is one of our commonest centipedes, Lithobius variegatus, very variegated. The picture's not fantastic, but when you see them in life, they're really obviously variegated, sort of purple and chestnut and pale. And one of our largest centipedes, quite fast running, and very similar to Lithobius forficatus, which is the common stone centipede that you find. But variegatus tends to be more western, and forficatus tends to be all over. So Bucks is sort of somewhere in the boundary there. So actually, sort of looking at which species we've got in each site could be quite interesting to try and see whether there's an interesting bit of work to be done, I think, on the sort of niche separation with these two species. But it's one that's very easy to identify, and you can't really mistake it in this country. Then we have the Scolopendromorpha, which are the big, probably more familiar to you as big tropical centipedes, and they're the ones that sometimes people keep as pets. They're very brightly coloured, quite poisonous, very active. And we have 3 species in Britain, all species of cryptops. And this is our largest one, which gets to about 50 millimetres in length, and it's very active, quite an aggressive centipede. Quite an odd distribution, South Wales and sort of down the southeast, but it is reasonably abundant in Bucks. It's one of the species that we can find in Bucks, so it's one to look out for, and quite a spectacular animal. And then this is one definitely to look out for. So these are the Scutidromorpha. So centipedes that run very fast, very long legs. Quite often people don't realise that they're a centipede. And until recently, the only place in Britain you could reliably find them was on the Channel Islands. But they've started to turn up on mainland Britain much more widely, very much in people's houses in domestic situations, but now starting to be found outside. And actually the first outside record was actually from Buckinghamshire. And if you look at the number of records, this is across Britain as a whole, not from Bucks, but very small numbers, just occasionally turning up, probably things that got imported with big luggage. But between 2021 and 2024, it's gone up to 136 records, so definitely one to look out for. Really spectacular beasts, quite difficult to catch, very, very, very active. They have a sort of unerring habit of shedding legs when you catch them, so they're obviously their mechanism of getting away from predators. So moving on to millipedes, this is the very common millipede that I showed you the map of early on. It's one of the ones that gets most regularly recorded because it's quite active. You find it in all sorts of different places, sheltering during the day, climbs up trees, climbs up walls. So millipedes have 2 pairs of legs per body segment. Much more difficult to count them on something like this, and the leg pairs are not as useful as they are in centipedes, which is probably quite good because they're actually quite hard to count. They have at least 11 leg-bearing segments that are quite long, usually slow-moving, detritivores, eating dead material, sometimes dead animal material as well as dead plant material. Some of them actually can be reasonably fleet of foot, but they're not quite as fast as the centipedes, and can be quite variable. There's a range of different orders with the different shapes. So we thought there's about 11,000 species worldwide, 86 in Britain, quite a few of them only found in hothouses and gardens, about 24 that have been recorded from Bucks. This isn't the leggiest one in the world, but it's one of the ones with the most legs, so they can get up to 750 legs altogether. Perhaps the most familiar millipedes to people are snake millipedes, so the cylindrical ones. This was one from Dancer's End, which turned up recently. Relatively unusual species that's found deeper in the leaf litter. Cylindrius britannicus on the left-hand side. 3 species that look very, very similar. You can only really separate them by dissecting them. All of which we have in Bucks, and one of them is a much more of a sort of saprophylic, large logs. That is possibly one of our sort of wood pasture species, and then Britannicus, which is a rather more common one. I started putting on the centre. I thought I'm not going to have time to talk about all the biology as well, so I started pulling out a few sort of what I've called fun facts about millipedes. And well, the one I picked out for snake millipedes is that they actually hatch from the egg with 6 legs, with 3 pairs of legs. And as each time they molt, they add on legs, they add on segments or body rings, and they also add on rows of eyes. So you can actually tell how many times a millipede has molted by looking at various aspects of it. Then we have the pill millipedes. The one on the left is our sort of common pill millipede, found in leaf litter in woodland areas, quite common, quite widespread. People sometimes confuse them with pill woodlouse, so I've done a woodlouse for you. The pill woodlouse, the head and the tail sort of meet and it forms a more or less perfect ball. With the millipede, that's actually not completely rolled up. You can see it's got this sort of strap on it, and it's not quite such a perfect ball because the tail sort of comes up over the top of the head. A lot of millipedes have annual life cycles. There's quite a few that have 1 year or 2 year or 3 year life cycles, but this one, Glomerus, can live up to 11 years, so really quite long-lived. So. Then we have a real buck speciality, so some of the tiny pill millipedes. These ones look like grains of sand. 2 different species there on the left-hand side. The one on the left is Adenomerus gibosa, and that's found on the island of Ireland and Aston Clinton. That's it. So it would really be worth looking for that in a few other places. It's actually been found at I've been found at Wendover Woods as well, but Aston Clinton several times, Wendover Woods once. So it would actually be interesting to know a bit more about its distribution. But they look like grains of sand, so they're quite challenging to find. It's also covered in knobbles, and these knobbles rub off as they get older. The one on the right-hand side is a much more widespread species, which is quite smooth and doesn't have the knobbles on it. Then the flat-backed millipedes, very common, particularly ones that look like the one on the right-hand side. They've got these paranota, or sort of plates that stick out from the side. Sometimes very well developed, like this one, sometimes much less developed than the one on the left-hand side. A lot of millipedes, not all of them, but a lot of them produce defence fluids, and you can actually stimulate them to produce this sometimes if you handle them a bit roughly. And sometimes you can see the globules on them, or you can smell them if you put them in a tube. And the flatback millipedes actually produce cyanide. Some of the others produce glomerin or quinones and things like that, so a range of different chemicals to stop things from eating them. And then we have what's generally quite a difficult group for people who are beginning with millipedes, is that you have these ones that are sometimes called the silk millipedes. And you get forms that look like the flat-backed ones, and then you get forms that look like the cylindrical ones. But actually the concerning feature is actually the structure of the ring and also the structure of the head. So you need to look at those in order to put them into this group. But they have spinnerets at the back, and they actually produce silk, which they use for creating molting chambers and egg-laying chambers. And then we have the very tiny polyxenids, which are sort of about 3 millimetres long, and I think probably get overlooked as beetle larvae more often, and people don't realise that they're millipedes. Found on walls, stones in churchyards, all sorts of different, very, very common, but I think not very often found. And pretty much all millipedes have their cuticle impregnated with calcium, which is why you tend to find them much more species and individuals on sites that are chalky or calcareous, but this one actually doesn't. These are hollow bristles that it's got sticking out from the side of it. And then just a little bit about telling males from females. On the millipedes, that the females have legs, every body ring has legs, has vulvae at the front, which are actually normally inside the body cavity so that you can't see them, but on this particular one it's they've extruded. On the left, actually I've got a pointer, I think. Yeah. So on the males, you've got a gap in the walking legs. So you can count 7 from the front, then there's a gap of 2, and then it has all of the other legs behind. And this one, it's actually got the male gonopods actually sticking right out from the body and being particularly large and obvious. So this is a species you can identify very easily externally. Sometimes it just looks like a gap in the legs there, so there's a gap in the walking legs. Sometimes the male cheek is expanded, and this one's this amazing sort of parrot shape, and that's to hang on to the female's antennae during mating. So quite a lot of them have got sort of sticky. You imagine trying to mate with something like this. It's quite slippery, so a lot of them have sticky pads on them to enable them to stick onto the female while they're walking up it.
Couple of minutes.
Nearly there. So Symphyla, which is one of the other groups which I haven't we mentioned right at the beginning, so myriapods, so millipedes, centipedes, Symphyla and pauropods. Very common, quite difficult to identify, and most people don't bother until recently. So there are starting to be people looking at Symphyla, but you have to slide mount them. And then finally the pauropoda, which are so tiny that most people in the British myriapodonizer group have never seen one. But actually we've got a really talented young lad called David, who's a student at Reading University, who is not only able to identify them but actually can find them, which is a good start. So now one of the biggest lists in the country is Dancer's End, which has 4 species, because he actually visited quite recently. Very, very tiny, but their key feature is that they have forked antennae. So I don't know whether you can see these, but it's got forked antennae at the front. So we're looking forward to actually having a bit of tuition and being able to identify pauropods and having a few more people looking at them. And where to go for more information. The website is really good. I can say that I don't really have very much to do with it, but it is a very good website. We do have a free CD, which I've got copies of at the back. If anybody's got a CD drive on their computer, do I do something? So do help yourself. It actually is downloadable from the website as well. And then a range of different books and keys to identify millipedes and centipedes. We are working on the update to the Linnaean Society. I've seen the first set of proofs, but they're going to need quite a lot of work before we get the final set of proofs, but we hope that it will be published this year. And there is already an aid gap under the Linnaean Society guide to centipedes. So quick run through centipedes.
Thank you, that's brilliant. Time for a quick question, Sue.
As most of us manage to count up to 6, how on earth do you not lose count of the legs?
Yes, it can be quite challenging. One of the ways that you can do it, if you want to do it on centipedes and live specimens, is if you get the film that you sometimes use to put greeting cards in, and put the animal in that, and then you can sort of confine it to one end of the one sort of corner of it, and it does give you a chance to actually stand some sort of chance of counting the legs. But on a lot of them you do need dead specimen. Not all of them, but some of them you do need dead specimens to do. So, I forgot to say, of course, that they're really active out in the winter. So all of you who are out looking for insects in the summer, in the winter you can just do myriapods and isopods instead.
Thank you.